if we keep treating founders as a commodity that we just need to scale up and have exit, we're always going to miss the point. And so what does it look like to see those founders as people first, as founders first, that are new to this, usually don't know what they're doing, need a lot of help, really good technicians, and really good at knowing what they know. And so what does it look like to develop them in the same way that you develop a new staff member?
We believe that anyone, anywhere can make startups. After spending more than a decade building our own company, we've learned a ton. We've mentored founders and built startup communities. We've helped craft government policies, and we've also invested in businesses. Some that succeeded and some that didn't. We've helped thousands of startup founders, funders, and facilitators. We're inspired by their dreams and determination. Our goal is to travel across America and meet as many as we can, tell their story, and share their lessons. We're on a mission to help you succeed, to show you that you aren't crazy, you aren't alone, you really can do this. We're here to make startups together.
I'm Debbie Irwin, and I am an entrepreneurial ecosystem builder and co-founder of the Manufactory Collective. And so for much of my ecosystem career, I was the executive director of the Shenandoah Community Capital Fund. And up until recently, I then got to transition to statewide work as the managing director of Lighthouse Labs.
All right. Tell us a little bit about the fund. What was that like when you came into it, and what was it like when you exited it?
Absolutely. So SCCF, when I first came into it, was back in 2017. At the time, it was called Stanton Creative Community Fund, and we were mostly focused on 3 localities in the Stanton area. So it was Stanton, Augusta, and Waynesboro. In November of 2018, the executive director that had been there for a little less than a year was like, I'm leaving. And then the other employee there was like, guess what? I'm leaving too. And so the board looked at me and they said, hey, guess what? You're executive director now. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. So the very end of December of 2018, I took over this organization. And once I really got into it, realized that we were a failing organization. And so one of the things with an ecosystem development work is you're constantly having to chase the dollar. And you're constantly experiencing funding cliffs. And if you're not staying on top of it and figuring out different ways and new ideas for funding this type of work, your organization will inevitably fail. And so moved us into a tiny little office in the Stanton Innovation Hub and got to work. And so worked by myself in the organization for a little over a year. Running the business boot camp, running the loan program, running all of the admin and the back office stuff, and then starting to build relationships. I met Larkin Garvey. We met at this meeting with the senators in DC with Senator Kaine and Senator Warner. And she told me about this thing called entrepreneurial ecosystem building. And she said, come with me to TomTom. I'm going to show you what this is all about. I met like 9 of the other people who are with this Startup Champions Network thing. And I was like, oh, I'm an ecosystem builder. Okay, this is what I'm doing. And so throughout that first year of being in the position on my own, I met some really amazing impact drivers in the Shenandoah Valley. And so there was 6 of us. There was a big group of about 17 of us, but then there was this group of 6 core people that started to figure out what does it look like to instead write a plan, make a plan, and write a grant to execute on it instead. Like, what if we just jumped right in and see what works? So we wrote a $1.2 million grant for Go Virginia. And we said, you know what? They keep talking about at this eShip Summit thing with Kauffman and at SCN that we want the field to be recognized. And so we are going to hire entrepreneurial ecosystem builders, and we're going to put it in the job title. And that will be that person's actual job. And so I got my first entrepreneurial ecosystem builders. And so I went from a staff of me to a staff of 3.5. And we started doing this work. We built an accelerator program, and we started finding that there is a lot more scalable and growth-oriented entrepreneurs in the Shenandoah Valley than we thought. And so we kept going, and I ended up finding a new opportunity about 8 weeks ago, but left the organization with a staff of 9. Still needing to figure out quite a bit when it comes to funding, but it's a much different organization now. We changed our name along the way to the Shenandoah Community Capital Fund. Instead of serving 3 localities, we serve 17, and we have 3 office locations across the region. And we're really driving around holistic entrepreneurial ecosystem building, really looking at the founder as a whole. What do they need mentally? What do they need financially? What do they need in terms of community support? And how does that change the way we do our work? So still a lot to be done, still a lot for the new executive director, Ryan, to figure out, but still really exciting to see how he's hit it in stride. Someone always asks me, they're like, how does it feel to be gone? And so the biggest thing for me is they kept going without missing a beat. Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks to what this community does for the organizations that exist within it. There's so much support. There's so much collaboration. We don't just talk it, we actually practice it. And so to see an organization be able to keep going without really missing a beat because their person who is there for 7 years leaves is really indicative of what this region has done as a whole. So it's a much different region than when I first came here, but there are still the beautiful elements of what make the Shenandoah Valley unique. We've just started to shine a light on them a little bit more.
You talked about the holistic view of support, and curious if you could just elaborate a little bit on that, why it's so important, and what's the difference in that versus maybe how it traditionally has been done.
I think when you go through the process of doing a startup yourself, and so SCCF really turned into a startup for me, I started to learn all of the mental hurdles that I personally had to overcome. All of the negative talk that I told myself, all of the imposter syndrome that I experienced, how lonely it was having downward pressure from a board and upward pressure from a staff, and no one else is ever going to understand that island. And saying, oh, the founder doesn't just need mentorship and advice in terms of here's how you run your financial, here's how you run your ops, here's how you run your team, or whatever. They need someone that they can say, I'm drowning in self-doubt. I'm drowning in this really complex staff issue that I don't know how to overcome. And the people that met me authentically and said, we know you're trying hard. We see what you're doing. We appreciate that you're trying and like all of this, but I'm going to be honest with you for a second. Here's what we're seeing. And so that mentality of direct is kind, and really calling out what that founder needs. I remember very specifically 3 years ago, I was working with a founder, and it was a difficult partnership that they were in, and just to stop her for a second and say, I think you need to look at your founder relationship first. This is going to fail if you don't get this figured out. And to be able to say like, hey, this is rocky because of relationships. And if we think about humans, we buy because of relationship. We buy because of emotion. We pick the people we pick because of relationship. We work with the organizations we work with because of relationship. And so if we keep treating founders as a commodity that we just need to scale up and have exit, we're always going to miss the point. And so what does it look like to see those founders as people first, as founders first, that are new to this, usually don't know what they're doing, need a lot of help, really good technicians, and really good at knowing what they know. And so what does it look like to develop them in the same way that you develop a new staff member? I feel like so often we assume that an entrepreneur knows it all because they founded the company. They're wearing all the hats. Of course they've got it covered. They're good. It's like, no. I can attest to, I don't know many things. My husband and I started a company last year, and we are still struggling to figure out quite a few things. And how do we create that space for a founder to easily come to me on a consistent basis and say, Deb, I don't know what I'm doing here, and I feel really self-conscious about it. Can you help me figure it out? How do I message this to someone so they'll help me and not make me feel like I'm stupid? It's like, okay, well, we'll put it this way. And so that mental health focus first, that support first versus just financial gain, ends up creating these really deep, robust relationships that outlast the venture, even if the venture fails, and helps them with the next venture and make sure the next venture is more successful because they're learning and not just failing.
Okay, we love it. So my name is Danielle Unique McEwen, and I'm the owner of Unique Vision. It's a creative marketing house. We really specialize and focus on helping with transformational leadership, as well as teaching an authentic approach to brand strategy, marketing strategy, and how that translates to content framework and showing up online confidently and, with your self-esteem and still being authentic to yourself and your mission.
So, do you remember the moment when you thought, like, maybe I have the courage to do this on my own instead of working for someone else?
I'm a purpose-driven entrepreneur. I've had to accept that about myself. When it comes to operating business traditionally, I don't do it. It's very unconventional. I definitely was one of those people that prioritize passion over profit, and there are consequences with that. However, in order to have the courage and the bravery to help someone with the full scope of their business, I felt very purpose led. And the moment ended up being when my first client was sharing with me their vision and their value and the mission that they wanted to have and with their particular audience, and they couldn't afford it. Honestly, they couldn't afford everything that they needed. It was going to be something that required a $10,000, $20,000 investment that I knew it would take them a moment to be able to afford that. And based on my kind of humble, if you will, beginnings, I wanted to give it to them regardless on if they could afford it or not, if whether they could afford it or not. But I also didn't want to discourage them by letting them know they couldn't afford it. So
Business model, right?
It's a very tough business model. And I definitely have experienced the toughness about it. But at the beginning, my passion really kind of led that, and understanding that marketing and branding is a luxury, and a lot of businesses don't see it as that. And if you want it done it right, if you want it done effectively and efficiently where it's built from the bottom up, a lot of people also aren't willing to do that. And so I don't think bravery and courage were necessarily the two things I had to pull from. It was more capacity and bandwidth, sifting through the problems and the issues that businesses initially thought they had in order to find the ability to be transparent with them about what they needed. And that part did require the courage and the bravery.
I'm really curious, one of the things that we recognize in this region is that it is predominantly rural.
Yep.
And you are in a rural community.
Yep.
You are a Black woman business owner here. And
Yep.
So tell us kind of the story of how you're integrated into this community with the ecosystem builders that have helped you kind of along the way.
Sure, of course. Also, thank you for that question. It definitely is a very unique position that has a lot of complexities,
Okay.
right? And so, luckily enough, I practice social listening a lot. It's just a part of who I am. So I'm always on the different platforms. I'm looking at the new innovative technology that's coming out. I'm looking at the trends. I'm looking at the virality. I'm looking at, what's working, what's not working, like the whole gamut. And in 2022, I saw the nature of the industry changing and shifting as it related to marketing as well as being a business owner. I saw that finally we are starting to come back to being in person. And the most important thing for you to be able to do is to build that community. It's always been important. It's always helped people to have a different level of investment and ownership in the brand that you're building, but you have to take people along the journey. And you can't take people along the journey if you're not like touching them or giving them a face and giving them a voice and like all of these other things, right? And so I started, like I said, partnering with the organizations who were in the area, but I had to get over my own fears, right? And so some of those fears included public speaking. At some point in my personal journey, I told myself, you suck at public speaking. It's interesting because I went to school for it. Like, I have several degrees. I have a BA in communication, a concentration in public relations, one minor in tourism and events management, one minor in business management. There are public speaking classes that are required for me to graduate, but whatever happened, whatever trauma it was, I was like, okay, I'm good with interpersonal communication. 3 people right here, this is my limit. And I decided at the beginning of last year to force myself to face the fears. I partnered with a local nonprofit organization called On the Road Collaborative. They work with youth, middle school, only middle school at the time. And I said, if I could kind of do this in front of middle schoolers for for an hour a week, well, shit, I can do it in front of anybody. You can cut that part. That's the toughest audience. Those middle school, they're going through all the things. But I basically was like, let me put myself in the fire of it. And this is the demographic, for lack of better terms, that will actually test what I'm made from. And the part before that was, Danielle, you need to combat the narratives you've told yourself and see if they're really true. Do I truly suck at public speaking when every time you get hired, people are like, oh my gosh, you're amazing at presentations. We love the experience. We love your presence. Like, why are you the only one who doesn't believe it?
It's the story you tell yourself.
That's the story I tell myself. So I forced myself in a place where I'd have to figure out, is this story true or did I create it? Because
and you have the power to rewrite it.
And I have the power to rewrite it.
So aside from, maybe we're all a little bit crazy because of what we do, you went through this whole process of trying to figure out how to make this organization work. You're struggling with everything about being a founder. And tell us how you and your husband came to the decision to start Manufactory Collective and do it all over.
My husband, Nate, is probably one of the smartest people I've ever met, and it's not just because I'm married to him. But he is so thoughtful and meticulous. And so when he first came to me with the idea to start a DIY garage, we've seen them in a couple other cities around the U.S. He is a mechanic by trade, so he's an aircraft mechanic and then an aeronautical engineer. And so he was like, I think it'd be really cool. I love working on my motorcycles. I love working on cars. I want to see if other people will do this with me. And I said, great, okay, you have to go through business boot camp at SCCF and validate your idea first. So you had to sit through the class I teach.
The irony of it all.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, maybe I'll just wait him.
He's like, mm-mm. So he sat through my class for 8 weeks. And as I watched him vet the idea more and we talked about it more, we were like, wait a second, there's more here. Because then I had founders coming to me saying, I have a really hard time accessing space. I have this awesome product idea. And if Nate is anything, he gives of his time and his expertise so freely, and is a really good people developer. And I was like, Nate's an ecosystem builder. Hold on a second. So we went out to Des Moines with SCN, and we met Maple Ventures, now Maple Studios, that's doing a manufacturing incubator model. And I was like, called Nate immediately. And I was like, hold on. We'd already identified a building that we wanted to do this with, but we weren't quite sure how we wanted to set it up yet. And I was like, I think I figured it out, man. Like, you need to hear about this. And so we talked about it. We vetted it. We looked at our 401k. We said, if this works, that'll give us a better return than our 401k. We're young. Let's risk it. And so then we dumped our 401k into this project. And I think the make or break moment for us is when we looked at it and we're like, if we think about our life's work and about our impact and what we want our kids to see us doing, it is helping other people fulfill those dreams. I think we've always been driven by that. We house baseball players every summer with the local collegiate league because there's something so fulfilling about helping other people navigate through that mindset and being like, oh, I see where you're going. Yeah, that actually is something. And Nate has that too. I don't think either of us realized we were really entrepreneurial until I was in a role supporting entrepreneurs. But the way he fixes things, the way he goes about solutions, the way he goes about thinking about new ideas, and just how excited that he gets, and then how much I love entrepreneurs. We're like, yeah, we should totally go do this ourselves. Do I regret it some days? Absolutely. Do I regret it every day? No. But I think the big trigger for us is, who do we want our kids to see us be? And it's a couple that takes chances. If we lose everything, I'll go move in with my mom. She's got a big house. We'll be okay.
My name is Jenna Couchy. I'm the owner of Asdelia May Children's Boutique. We opened in October of 2023. So we've been only open for 6 months. Shopping with me, I hope that families feel more of an experience. Obviously, one-on-one assistance, helping you curate a look that is not going to be at a department store with every child looking the same. If there's something that you need that I don't have in the store, I would love to help find that for you. I feel like I'm constantly doing that as I figure out what customers want. So I'm always looking and searching for things and ordering things for others to help them have their dream of whatever occasion they're trying to create come true.
Let everybody who watches this know how they can find you.
Yeah. Tell us where you are, your address, website, the whole 9 yards.
You can find Asdelia May Boutique in the Liberty Street Mercantile Building on 76 West Gay Street, Harrisonburg, Virginia.
Are you online?
I am online, asdeliamay.com. I am on Facebook, Asdelia May Boutique, and on Instagram at Asdelia May Boutique.
Is it aspirational for you to open more of these, or open a bigger one, or get acquired, Toys R Us or something? I don't know. Is there some sort of bigger dream to all of these things, or are you okay right where you are right now?
I have lots of dreams.
Okay, well, share with us some of your dreams.
I feel like they continue to grow as this grows, and that seems crazy only being 6 months in. But as you wait a year and a half for the place to build, I think you start to see more and more of what you want to be and how you want to grow. I definitely see Asdelia May becoming another location, maybe in the Rockingham County area. I would love to collaborate with other organizations and maybe build on to what we already have and offer maybe some party services. I would love to have a balloon bar, offer party assistance for celebrations, because that's what we're all about here, is celebrating every moment at every stage. So
That's great. That's great.
Lots of things.
I mean, one of the things we see, obviously, when someone's starting a new business is there's sort of a honeymoon phase, obviously, right? You put all your blood, sweat, and tears into a company, and then sort of year 2 or 3 might hit, and maybe there's some things you weren't expecting. And so, when we talk about entrepreneurship and the success rates for that, getting over the hump, pivoting based on, what's going on in your community, what's going on in the country, what's going on in the business, right? And so it's nice to see that, whatever those dreams are, making them come true is a combination of what it sounds to me like what a term we use is social capital, which is the partnerships, and then financial capital. So having the funds, whether it's through your sales or whether it's through other kinds of partnerships to be able to scale your business and launch it. And so, I always want to kind of put it out there in the universe, okay, well, what would happen if, all those things were to aspire for you.
Right.
And so those sound like really great dreams.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I know one of the things we talked about in a previous meeting was your ability to tap into also philanthropic dollars. And so I was wondering if you could share with our audience a little bit about what that looked like. It sounds to me like you maybe were able to work with the community foundation.
Yep.
And I know that historically some of the private philanthropy dollars would be hesitant to work maybe in the economic development space. And we all know that, yes, funding issue is real for the ecosystem building community. And so what did that look like? And just kind of maybe walk us through that for a minute.
Yeah, one of the most innovative people I've ever met in that philanthropic space is Dan Lehman. So Dan Lehman is the CEO of the Community Foundation of the Central Blue Ridge, and we have been discussing for years impact investing. How do we start doing impact investing? How do we take donor-advised funds and doing that? And as we kept moving throughout the process, we just couldn't get community members to move on that, especially if it's someone who's putting their money in a community foundation. They're usually risk averse. Mm-hmm. And so we're like, okay, well, we don't know what to do. So I was like, Dan, if you ever find a person that is super passionate about funds for entrepreneurs, like, please let me know. And lo and behold, he ends up finding this person who had owned multiple businesses in the food service space. And as he was talking to this donor a little bit more, he found that donor's passion was for people just like him. Mm-hmm. And so Dan was like, I've been baking on this idea with an organization for 6 years now. What if we built a fund? And so he ended up being able to create a fund with this donor that will be an evergreen fund that will take 4% off the top each year to give out as grants to entrepreneurs. So it's really operating as an endowment. And then SCCF will take a management fee on it. But that is a easily replicable model. We see it done in universities all the time. There is a lot less risk with that because it's still an evergreen fund. And so what does it look like to play on the interest within an economy? And instead of saying, oh, you have to impact invest and potentially get no return, to say, park it in this fund and we'll grant off the top. And the more we can get others to give into this, the more we can grant out, rather than putting all of that responsibility on one investor to make the risk. It starts to mitigate that risk some. It starts to get earlier access to founders, particularly underrepresented founders. That $5,000, $10,000 cash, that's actually highly impactful when you're trying to get an idea to an MVP. And so that non-dilutive fund is so impactful for that early stage founder, and this donor immediately got it. And we're starting to see that trend with some new donors as well. So as these founders are making exits and things like that, what does it look like to instead say, hey, give my organization $150,000 of operating income? What does it look like to say, will you park it in this fund that pays for the grants that we give our founders? Things like that. How do we create more sustainable models that we can fund our operations with, rather than it just being grant after grant after grant after grant after grant? And yes, it takes some time to get there. So then you can partner with the federal agencies and the state agencies to get your startup grant money. But if you can lead with the founders that have had successful exits and parking it in a fund with a community foundation who's already set up for it, you start to unlock some really unique ways for funding grants for founders and operating dollars. That's great.
Do you remember the moment when you realized that this is the work? And
it was 9 months into SCCF when it was as executive director of SCCF, when the group of 6 of us were trying to figure out, okay, how do we do this accelerator program and the ecosystem builders and things like that. And I was driving up to Winchester, which is an hour and a half away from me, thinking it through. And I was like, what if SCCF raised our hands to run this? Huh. And then I asked that at the meeting between the 6 of us, and they were like, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the moment it clicked of like, oh, the convening, the ecosystem building, the navigating for entrepreneurs. Like, that's what clicked when it was a group of 6 of us looking at each other and saying, yeah, that makes complete sense. Oh, that's service market fit now. Okay. And so it's like that aha moment of, oh, I could step into this role. It's who I am naturally as a human. I see all of the puzzle pieces and I can tell people what the end puzzle actually looks like. I just need some help with actually getting the puzzle together. And that's indicative in my literal life too. I hate puzzles. I can see all the puzzle pieces and I know when one's missing and I can see the picture. I need help putting it together.
When Dan told you that he had a funder, do you remember where you were and what was going through your mind?
It was in January, and it was an email of, hey, just want to let you know, I've come across this thing. We need to have a conversation. I think it could be really good. And at that moment, it was like oh shit, but I'm interviewing for something else right now. I really need to get this done. Like, this is the thing. Like, oh my gosh, this is what we've been working for years. And so it was just that, whoa, someone gets it.
I think that's one of the things that we've seen off and on, even in Startup Champions Network, when we talk about sort of the intersection of money and what it looks like. Because I think we do talk a lot about the grants and the governments and the partnerships, but there's a whole other pot of money out there, you know, whether it's the venture capitalists or the angels and the philanthropists, and it's their tool, right? It's their tool to bring back to their communities. And so the idea that it's almost like you've been planting the seed, Deb, for like the last 6 or 7 years, and it just happens that yes, this person who understands what it was like, had they maybe not had some things way back in the day, and now they kind of want to pay it forward. And so it's a real flywheel effect of saying, like, okay, here's that money, it's going back into the community, the next generation, can't take it with you. And so having those kinds of people talk about their why is equally valuable, because you could do it in your next community, you can do it with your next demographic, you can do it in your next industry. And I think that it's pioneering to think like, okay, here was somebody who was willing to take a chance with their funds. What does it look like for somebody else like that person?
And I'm not going to know them. And so, like, what does it look like to have the relationship with Dan and build up that really cool conversation with Dan and start to realize this is a super innovative, impactful person people need to know, and know that he's going to be able to take it and run with it. And so what does it look like to give over those ideas to someone else? Because at the end of the day, yes, it was Dan and I talking about things. Dan is the one that made the thing happen. Absolutely. And so what does it look like to sprinkle these ideas places, knowing that you may not be the one to bring it to fruition, and that's A-okay, because the long-term impact is the most important part.
So you can leave this community, go on to your next journey, knowing that there's like a legacy of that relationship. No, that's phenomenal.
So assuming this continues to work out, what does a Shenandoah Valley look like when capital is not scarce?
I think one of the biggest things I've always hoped for a region like this is that the Shenandoah Valley is synonymous with entrepreneurship, but we're talking about all facets of it. One of the big things that I've continued to learn in my time of ecosystem building is we've got to worry about all of the other 97% that don't need venture. And so being in the manufacturing incubation space, I'm also seeing these are growth-oriented companies. They make big impacts on their communities. And so what does it look like in the Shenandoah Valley to where we have money for capital expenditures, we have money for upfitting your space, we have money for leasehold improvements, we have money to get your prototype out of your head into an MVP, we have money to get your service-based business growing. What does it look like to help any entrepreneur grow, not just the scalable tech entrepreneur grow? Because we know that that is what creates real impact. And so what does it look like to help entrepreneurs never believe they're just something? I come across so many founders. I'm just a small business owner. I'm just a Main Street owner. I just do this. And it's like, that's A-okay if that's what you want to be. But what if we remove the word just? And say, I'm a small business owner and I also want to own 5 other locations. Okay, cool. Let's work on that. Like, how can I help you get there? So what does it look like to really unlock the full dream? Not just the full potential of the founder, but the full dream of the founder. Because they always hold a little bit of it back. When you talk to them of like, what's your exit plan? What do you want the big idea to be? And they're so scared to put it out there. But it's like, no, I really want you to put it out there because I assure you I will believe in you. I will be honest with you if there's a wrong step along the way, and you'll feel it too. But what does it look like in the Shenandoah Valley where dreamers and schemers are actually putting the dream out there for people to lean into and talk about? and I think that's when you really start to see entrepreneurs thrive, because they're putting their full self out there.